Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, everyone. It's almost afternoon.
Yep, a minute to go.
And then 2021 can officially begin.
Here we go.
It's not real till we get this started.
And it's exactly noon. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is the January 2021 Transportation Planning Board meeting. Two quick reminders. Please mute your mics when not speaking to reduce any background noise. And also we record the meeting to help us produce minutes, as well as are currently streaming the meeting to our YouTube live page so the public can follow along with the meeting. And with that, I will be passing it along to the chair to officially start our meeting.
All right, well, thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am Charles Allen, this year's chair of the Transportation Planning Board, and let me now call the TPB's January 21st, 2021 meeting to order. I want to wish everybody a happy new year. It's only January 21st, and it feels like it's been at least 6 months, but it's still a happy new year. And I think we can all put 2020 in the rearview mirror, and we're all going to work hard for an amazing 2021 and what really will be a year that hopefully is focused on health and safety, but also recovery for our jurisdictions and for the region. One of the carryovers from 2020 is the virtual meeting platform. I think we all became experts in this over the last several months. Hopefully we will be able to meet in person sometime later this year. Until such time to reach our residents, the audio and WebEx meeting is live streamed, and it's also, as you heard, it's on the internet and on YouTube. While you all are familiar with our process for these virtual meetings, for the benefit of those watching us online or joining us for the first time, let me briefly review the procedures that we will be following during the virtual meeting. First off, I will ask Lynn to take a roll call of members or alternates so that we can document your presence at this meeting, make sure that we have a quorum. Then for agenda items, I will presenter complete their briefing, then invite questions from members, and what we'll do is in turn by jurisdiction. For the action items on the agenda, once the presenter has completed the briefing, I will invite one of you to make a motion to adopt the resolution, followed by a second of the motion made. I'll then invite questions from members by jurisdiction, and at the end of discussions, I'll call for a vote by jurisdictions. And the way that we started doing this many months ago, I will ask for only the nay votes or the abstentions. Helps just all move through a little faster. And the rest of the votes from those present will be assumed to be a yes. So just as a reminder, if you're a nay or an abstention, we'll need you to speak up. Lastly, we're all used to, as a friendly reminder, please mute your microphones if you're not speaking. That helps make sure that we don't have too much background noise. And then when you unmute your mic, if you'll please state your name and jurisdiction when you speak so that the record can correctly reflect that. So with that, Lynn, let me turn to you. And if you can please take our roll call and make sure that we've got a quorum and can get rolling.
Great. Thank you, Chair Allen. So I'm going to roll through by stating the agency or the jurisdiction. And if you could state your name, we'll capture your attendance. We'll also be keeping an eye on the participant list. So if I miss you, I'll be trying to catch you there. And hopefully I'll be slow enough to for you guys to catch up. All right, we'll start with the District of Columbia, District Department of Transportation.
Hey, good afternoon. This is Leslie Rupert with DDOT.
Hello. District Office of Planning.
This is Kristen Calkins for Director Trueblood.
Thank you. District Council, Ms. Brooke Pinto.
Hi, this is Brooke Pinto, DC Council.
Thank you. District Council, Charles Allen.
I'm here.
Thanks. District Council, Christina Henderson. Okay, great. Moving on to Maryland, Maryland Department of Transportation.
Earl is here.
Thanks, Earl. City of Bowie. Charles County.
Jason Groth is here. I believe Ruben Collins will be joining us shortly.
Great, I'll keep an eye out for him. College Park.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Denise Mitchell here, alternate.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Patrick Wine here.
Oh, Patrick. Got you, Patrick. Thanks. Frederick County. City of Frederick. I saw that Miss Russell was having mic issues, but I'm going to count you as present because I saw you. City of Gaithersburg.
Sorry, I would. Did you get that? I was sorry. Frederick County Council. I'm not sure if Mark Mishler is joining us or not.
Okay, great. Got you, Mr. Hagan.
Hi, Neil Harris from Gaithersburg is here.
Thanks, Neil.
Dennis Senslinger from Gaithersburg is here.
Got you too. City of Greenbelt. City of Laurel.
Hi, Mayor Craig Moslin.
Thank you. Montgomery County Executive.
Gary Ehrenrich is here. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, Gary. Montgomery County Legislative.
Councilmember Evan Glass here.
Thank you. Prince George's County Executive. Terry or Vic?
Yes, Vic Weisberg, alternate for Prince George's County.
Thanks, Vic. Prince George's County Legislative. I'll keep an eye out. City of Rockville.
Bridget Donald Newton's here.
Thank you. Tacoma Park. I saw Casey.
Can you hear me? Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, now we got you. Maryland Senate is a vacant position, so Maryland House of Delegates.
Mark Corman.
Thank you. Moving on to Virginia Department of Transportation.
Maria Sinor is here.
Hi, Maria. City of Alexandria. Mr. Aguirre mentioned that he may be missing it, so I just wanted to let you all know that. Arlington County.
Christian Dorsey is here.
Thank you. City of Fairfax.
David Meyer is here.
Thank you. Fairfax County Legislative.
Walter Alcorn's here.
Mr. Alcorn.
James Walkinshaw is here as well.
Gotcha. Thank you. City of Falls Church.
Dave Snyder here. Thank you.
Thank you. Fauquier County. Loudoun County.
Kristen Umstadt here.
Thank you.
Bob Brown, alternate here.
Thank you. City of Manassas.
Pam Sebesky here.
Thank you. City of Manassas Park. Miss Rochelle. Prince William County.
Ann Wheeler here.
Thank you.
Vic Angry here.
Gotcha. Thank you. And our Virginia Senate and House of Delegate seats still remain vacant, so we'll move on to WMATA.
Mark Phillips, alternate here.
Thank you. Federal Highway Administration. Federal Transit Administration.
Dan Koenig with FTA is on.
Thanks, Dan. National Capital Planning Commission. I'll keep an eye out for Julia. Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority. And National Park Service. That concludes the roll call. We have a quorum. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Next, we also check to see if we receive any comments from the public. And I think the practice has been, Lynn, that you help summarize those for us. So let me turn to you for our public comments.
Great, thank you. So we received 2 comment letters and both are posted on the TPB meeting page for your review. I will provide a short summary at this time. So the Coalition for Smarter Growth suggests that there are critical gaps in the proposed Visualize 2045 planning assumptions and analyses. They recommend that Visualize 2045 model 2 land use scenarios. They also recommend completing the climate change mitigation study sooner than is planned and that subsequent greenhouse gas scenario analysis be applied so further changes can be made to the CLRP package if needed after the conformity analysis. The second letter we received is from the Northern Virginia Transportation Alliance, which transmits their 2021 Transportation Priorities Statement, which includes the transportation priorities of 24 leading regional business and civic organizations from across the DC area. The Alliance applauds the TPB for addressing the existential threat of climate change by setting critical greenhouse gas reduction goals, and they believe the language requiring a reduction of vehicle miles traveled is misguided. Due to the growth that COG is forecasted, they urge you to continue prioritizing regional multimodal transportation improvements that will do the most to reduce congestion and travel time, between major regional employment centers, move the greatest number of people throughout the region, increase region-wide network reliability, and promote regional economic development and growth. I encourage you to read both the comment letters as posted. Thank you, Chair Allen. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you very much, Lynn. All right, then next we'll move to agenda item 2, which is the approval of our December 16th, 2020 meeting minutes. Let me invite a motion to adopt the minutes of our December 16th meeting. Just a quick reminder, please state your name and jurisdiction when you make that motion or a second. Is there anybody to make the motion?
Pam Stabesky, Manassas City, I move.
Thank you, Pam. Is there a second?
Vic Angry, second.
Thank you, Vic. All right, excellent. Thank you very much. A motion and a second. All right, are there any corrections or comments on the meeting minutes themselves before I put it to a vote? All right, hearing none, then we will move to a vote. A quick reminder, what I'm asking for is a nay or an abstention. If you remain silent, it is assumed that that is a yes. So, are there any abstentions or nays from the District of Columbia? Hearing none. Are there any abstentions from Maryland? Hearing none. Are there any abstentions or nays from Virginia? Hearing none. And there any abstentions or nays from Armada or other federal agencies? Hearing none. All right, then our meeting minutes are approved for December 16th. Thank you. Next, let me turn to item number 3, our technical committee report. We have a written summary of our technical committee's December 4th meeting. Our new chair of the technical committee, Jason Groth, will brief us next. So Jason, let me turn it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The technical committee met and reviewed many of the items that are on your agenda today. It was felt that the UPWP breakdown was a good idea to simplify it and sort of do that cursory review today, which you're going to see today. So definitely a benefit there. We also took a deeper dive on a lot of the items revolving the 2045 plan, broke it down into many elements and discussed a lot of the items that had occurred during the December TPB meeting. In addition, we reviewed the next round of or next initiative, I should say, of the TLC program, which we're very much looking forward to. And as a member jurisdiction representative, I think that's an incredibly beneficial program. And with that, we also received the same Coalition for Smarter Growth comments for consideration, which was discussed and you will also be discussing later. With that, that concludes my comments. If there's any questions, I'm here to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. All right, so what we'll do is go by jurisdiction, see if there are any questions. So to the District of Columbia, are there any questions? And next to Maryland.
Yes, this is Casey from Tacoma Park.
Hey, Casey.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the comments from the Coalition for Smarter Growth. I'm not sure if that's something that we'll be addressing later in the meeting or if now is an appropriate time to ask, but I'm curious if staff could speak a little bit to those recommendations and if we could hear a little bit more about how both the greenhouse gas analysis is anticipated to be incorporated into the long-range plan and also the housing targets as well.
Thanks, Casey.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to respond to both. Number one, how the greenhouse gas analysis is anticipated to be incorporated into the long-range plan. As we informed the board last month in a memo, staff has already begun planning for a detailed technical analysis, specifically looking for, based on previous inputs from the board and as documented in a letter from Armada, trying to answer the question, what is the level of outcome in various strategies that we will need to realize in this region to help attain the greenhouse gas reduction goals that the region has set, both for 2030 as well as the 2050. So that work has been planned, as Jason noted. We briefed the technical committee, and we are looking to begin the analysis and complete it, all of it, by the end of December, which is really an expedited schedule. The last time we did it, we took about 18 months, but we are trying to do it in half the time. And I believe we can, because there has been past analysis that will be very useful and helpful in us. We won't be starting from zero. So we are committed to doing that by December. The second thing is the conformity analysis of the Visualize 2045 update is not, we will only be beginning it later this year, but the results of that analysis will come back to the TPB next year, around April timeframe. And at that time, we will both have, by then, we will have the results of the technical analysis that will tell us what is the level of outcomes we need. And then we will be able to see what is the level of outcome the current plan will provide, so that we can understand where the gaps are and help look at how to close those gaps. The second point, Ms. Kostick, regarding how to incorporate the region's goals for housing, particularly the goal for increasing the number of housing units, both by 2030 and by 2045. That is an activity currently. The planning directors from all of the TPB member jurisdictions are working. They have generally understand the goal. The goal is for about 100,000 new housing units, additional housing units by 2030, and about 130,000 additional housing units by 2045. But the local planning directors are currently examining what are their current zoning and planning documents, how can this additional growth be accommodated, and that work, as soon as it is completed, we anticipate that that work will be reflected in the forecast that the planning directors provide TPB for use. Later next month, we are expecting the planning directors to approve what we are calling round 9.2 forecast, which reflects some changes to what was in 9.1, but it does not include everything because those discussions have not yet been completed. So we are obliged to use these official forecasts. So as soon as that work becomes, we are hopeful that before long we will have a major update because of the 2020 census data that will be available and the number of jurisdictions who are redoing that planning and zoning codes will be able to reflect all of that inputs.
All right,
Thank
thanks,
you
Conti. Thanks, Casey. And just Conti, the audio sounded a little bit glitchy there, just so you're aware.
Okay, thank you.
We could hear you, but it was just a little bit of kind of skipping around, unless that was just my the head shaking. Okay, so that's across the board. Okay, so thank you, Casey. Any other questions you had? Anybody else from Maryland? All right, any questions for the technical committee from Virginia?
Hi, Dave Snyder. I just wonder if Conti could reduce to writing the response he just gave so that we can all have it and understand exactly what you said and how it fits into these questions. Thank you.
That's a great suggestion, David. Conti, would you be able to help do that for us?
Yes, sir. Happy to do that. We'll send it right after the meeting. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Anyone else from Virginia? And WMATA, any other agencies?
Yes, Chair, I would just like to add the comment. This is Mark Phillips from WMATA. We did discuss this in the technical committee, and I just want to add the point that we would definitely like to see the greenhouse gas emissions of DMT targets one of the scenarios be a direct set of targets for VMT reduction, keeping all other things equal or only growing according to their past performance. So all other policy decisions would be kept equal. Just give us clear VMT targets, and sharing the comments from the other that it should be developed and delivered in time to inform the long-range plan. Thank you, Conti.
Great. Thank you, Mark. All right. Any other comments or questions from other agencies on the technical committee report? All right. Hearing none, then I'll next move. Thank you, Jason, and thank you, Conti. Next, I will move to our Community Advisory Committee annual report. Glad to recognize the immediate past chair of our Committee Advisory Committee, Nancy. I'm glad that we're also using a new name, the Community Advisory, as opposed to the Citizens Advisory, which speaks to the inclusive approach that we are trying to use at TPB. Nancy is going to present us with a brief report of the committee accomplishments last year. And I'll note that later in today's meeting, we'll be appointing members to the new and restructured committee. And so, Nancy, let me turn it to you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair Allen, and good day to everybody. We met 10 times in 2020 to fulfill our mission, which is to promote public involvement in transportation planning for the region and to provide independent, region-oriented citizens advice to the TPB on transportation plans and issues. But first, I want to thank the staff, notably Brian Hayes, for the excellent work and support that they give us during the course of the year. In 2020, we had our kickoff meeting in person with the usual lovely and well appreciated dinner. And at that meeting, Chair Russell outlined her vision for the coming year with focus on equity, climate, and safety. 1 month later, at the start of the COVID health emergency, we were the first COG committee to move online. Over the year, we were briefed on and provided input on a number of topics that included the Regional Travel Survey, TCI, transit-oriented communities, and Visualize 2045. Our accomplishments for the year are as follows. We contributed to 3 products that the TPB subsequently approved. The safety resolution. Throughout 2019 and into 2020, we met regularly with the TPB safety planner to learn about the studies underway and to provide input. Many of the recommendations reflect our input. And in our 2019 annual report, we had written, the CAC believes that every life is important and that any death related to transportation is unacceptable. Our members continue to hold this as true, as well as the value that transportation planning overall should be more people focused on the part of planners and system operators. We encourage the TPB to continue its work in making travel safer in the region, both on the roads and in transit, and we endorse the new forays into transit safety analysis for the benefit of both transit staff and riders. The CAC also provided substantial input into the TPB Participation Plan 2020 update through both committee discussion and submitted comments. Some recommendations we gave for expanding public engagement resulted from increased general public awareness of challenges faced by low-income populations and equity emphasis communities as brought to the fore by the pandemic. We also discussed the restructuring of the CAC membership and our committee's procedural update. Our concerns, our discussions echoed several of those of the TPB. We concurred, however, that changes were warranted to wrap in fuller perspective so we can provide fuller input to you, better feedback, and to improve our procedure and to learn more about transportation issues in communities throughout the region. Contributory to CAC suggestions was the unexpected move to online. Technology made our attendance easier from afar, and in concert with presentations and staff-facilitated discussion, it allowed us greater internal discussions, the ability to articulate wider ranging reactions, and an increased opportunity to pose questions to presenters, staff, or to each other. So it'll be interesting to see in the coming year how both the format of meetings and our expansion and reconfiguration impact our discussions. While some usual topics and areas of special interest for our members were put on hold by disruptions to data and the public pandemic conditions, we still discussed ongoing TPB research and activities such as the 10-year travel survey, We were very interested in what the survey revealed about travel characteristics, also as related to land use and in relation to the core or subregions, as well as to household demographics. We found the data complex, extensive, but illuminating. We wanted continued information on what it generally revealed and in relation to how pandemic-related behavior changes could carry over in post-pandemic to reduce VMT and congestion. Also, telecommuting. As the pandemic unfolded, we requested updates about how telecommuting and other transportation behavior changes in manner, volume, and pattern affected the region, and about how any improvements to circulation or congestion might be sustained as pandemic restrictions ease. It was notable to learn that telecommuting that arose from this unfortunate unplanned test was one ray of light. This past year highlighted how personal productivity as well as transportation benefits can arise from telecommuting and hopefully be sustained. And the 2020 CAC had the following recommendations for its successor committee. We encourage the CAC chair and the TPB chair to meet regularly to establish a strong relationship between each other and to keep the board invested between the CAC and the board, and keep each group invested and engaged with each other. Additionally, we urged members to seek relationships with all TPB officers and TPB members from their home jurisdictions. We also asked to reinstate CAC members to other committees like the 2045 task force, as well as additional committees to stay informed, and also so we can help contextualize your discussions during those meetings. We also requested that the staff provide more support by shareable information materials. Several of us had gone in the past to speak to community groups, but this should be standardized so we can all take advantage of opportunities as they arise. This wouldn't only help us, it would expand communications and visibility for Visualize 2045 and for the TPB itself. The committee would also like, and this is part of the reconfiguration, we would like more input from fellow members about what's going on in each other's jurisdictions. And hopefully this too can become standard with the advent of reconfiguration with a wider geographic and viewpoint reach. The committee feels that there is a lack of commitment from TPB members to support the aspirational initiatives and to implement those aspirations in their jurisdictional projects. We encourage the board to measure progress along its member jurisdictions to better realize these goals. The public has always wanted greater transparency in planning and its leaders to walk the walk. These aspirations embodying growing aspirations and values held by a large part of your constituents. I hope, for one, that changes to Visualize 2045 language adopted at your December meeting will strengthen prioritization of these aspirations by every jurisdiction and make each jurisdiction accountable to each other as well as to your constituents. Our topics of interest for 2021, well, the extraordinary events forced some usual TPB activities to adapt and brought greater awareness of focus topics, as with equity, which spurred deeper consideration and TPB commitment. The outgoing CAC would like its successor group to continue the following: all aspects of safety in all aspects of transportation, and of multimodal access, including shared or non-motorized modes with greater connectivity amongst all of these modes. And we also were interested in new technologies or methods for collecting data for these and other topics. We anticipate new transportation topics for consideration to emerge during 2021 as the region recovers from the pandemic and there's federal administration transition, and as TPB aspirations spur change in the evolving new normal. Thank you very much, Chair Ellen, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much. How about this? I'm going to mix it up and I'll do it in the opposite order of what we've been calling. So why don't I first turn for any questions for Nancy to WMATA, any of our agencies? keep people on their toes. All right, let me turn next to Virginia. All right, let me turn next to Maryland. All right, let me turn to the district.
Hi, I'm sorry. Can we go back a minute? This is Councilmember Denny Tavares.
Absolutely, jump right in.
Yes, no, you said that folks didn't feel that there was enough commitment to some of the issues that people would like to pursue. What specifically? Can you be a little bit more specific? I mean, I think that was a very general comment. And are there specific policy proposal or specific projects that were being considered that you didn't that the group did not feel?
Well, I cannot speak for each jurisdiction, but I would have to say from my experience as a community advocate that seeing projects that go on in my state, there's conflicts between the state and what local jurisdictions hold as their priorities. And there's not always transparency or opportunity to the fullest of public participation. But I hope that in the 2021 CAC that these things can be articulated and recorded. There was discussion of asking each member to, with the assistance of staff, prepare a presentation about what's going on in their home environment. So I think this is something that hasn't been articulated fully yet, but is important to continue into the next CAC. We'll provide as best feedback as possible, and we often feel that we're in the intermediary, more direct position between general public participation and the TPB itself, if that illuminates it at all for you. If you
No, for sure. Thank you. I appreciate that, because I remember myself asking for support regarding the Purple Line when it was still very contentious. Gladly, it's something that was ultimately resolved favorably, but now we have to figure out where are we going to find this $200 to $300 million, right? So for the settlement payment. So I can definitely see that, and I'm not clear where COG is on maglev and other proposals that have been put forth by the governor, but yes.
Thank you. I do remember your speaking about what was happening to businesses and the community because of Purple Line, and it was deeply concerning. And we have similar feelings, I think, in all the jurisdictions, that it would be great. It depends on the profile and authority of COG and the TPB to sort of be a referee when needed, when things go awry. So I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you all. All right, let me turn to see if there were any questions from the district. All right. Well, again, Nancy, thank you so much for that report as well as for the work. And I'm looking forward, as we'll talk in a little bit, about the incoming CAC and to continue some of that important work that's taken place. So thank you so much. All right, next we're going to move to the steering committee actions and report of the director. We all have a written summary of the January 8th steering committee meeting and report from our staff director, Conti. But Conti, let me turn to you and see if there's anything else that you wanted to add or to summarize, and then I'll turn to questions from the jurisdictions.
Sure. Thank you. Sorry about the audio. Can you hear me okay now? Excellent. Thank you, sir. My written report has been provided to you. The steering committee approved 3 TIP amendments, two from Maryland DOT and one from District Department of Transportation. I won't go into the details of that. A fourth action that the steering committee took pertains to the transportation alternative set-aside funds from the District of Columbia. Members may recall, particularly Chair Allen, that last year when these funds were allocated, because the request was less than the funding available, there was some unallocated money. And one of the things we were able to do is use some of that unallocated money and provide additional funding for a project that the TPP had previously selected, because that project needed additional funding to be completed. So that was a positive step. There's still some money left. We hope that we trust it'll come back to the TPP. Just a couple notes, if I could point out from my memo to you. The TPP is currently accepting applications for its transportation and land use connections program. Members will get $30,000 to $60,000 for their projects in technical assistance. The deadline is March 6th, and if jurisdictions want to submit an abstract, that's January 26th. But I'm also equally excited to inform you that staff has opened up soliciting applications for improving roadway safety in the region. This is a brand new program that you all created last year, and you set aside $250,000 for this on an annual basis. So member jurisdictions who have any sort of project or a program that would help reduce fatalities and reduce serious injury crashes on the roadway will get technical assistance valued at anywhere between $60,000 and $80,000. So the application deadline is March 22nd, and we really look forward to getting this underway. Regarding the transportation and greenhouse gas emissions, we have been discussing about climate change. I would draw your attention to a memo, which is on page 59, that 3 Northeastern and Mid-Atlantic states, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and the District of Columbia, have signed a memorandum of understanding committing their jurisdictions to a program called Transportation and Climate Initiative Program, TCI program. This is a program where the model rules are yet to be developed. So the 4 jurisdictions or 4 states have committed to, once the model rules are developed, they will take action to implement this program. What this program entails is really capping the amount of greenhouse gases, CO2 emissions, that can be released from fossil fuels used on on-road vehicles. So once that cap has been established, the statewide fuel suppliers will have to purchase permits to sell gasoline, and in that revenue generated when they purchase those permits will become available for implementing projects and programs in the transportation sector that can help reduce greenhouse gases. So Virginia and Maryland have also working on developing these model rules. They haven't yet signed the MOU, but they're working to develop the model rules. In fact, Maryland Department of Transportation, Earl Lewis, member of TPB, is the co-chair of this group that is developing the model rules. So all of that is in a memo that we have shared with you. Also, as part of the outreach for updating Visualize 2045, staff has been holding virtual focus group sessions throughout the region as part of our qualitative public opinion research. And the topics we are engaging in these focus groups are equity, safety, and climate change. 10 such sessions will be held throughout this region. We started doing this on January 5th, and the last session will be done by February 7th. And one of the things I would like to note is these 10 sessions are being held with particular attention being paid to the demographic distribution of the participants, the race, ethnicity, income. In fact, one of the 10 sessions will be entirely held in Spanish. The 3 brief announcements, Mr. Chairman, that was not in the memo, if I could. The latest round of federal funding to help mitigate the economic impacts of COVID-19 pandemic It's called the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. It provides $50 million nationwide for the first time for Enhanced Mobility Program. That is a program intended for assisting seniors and individuals with disabilities. The TPB administers this program. We understand that we will be receiving about $590,000 from this new round of federal aid. So we will be developing a proposal on how to distribute this to services throughout the region that is intended to help senior citizens and people with disabilities. Second, members will recall that in December, we kicked off our work on the 2022 update of Visualize 2045. You must have received an email with links to sample social media posts, newsletters, and text, and some videos and infographics. We would love your help in spreading the word to your constituents. There are ambassador kits that have been provided. Please let me or Abigail, your staff, know if there's any way we could help you with that. As part of the packet, we have also developed an infographic that provides an overview of the TPB. Oftentimes, people are not very clear who the TPB is or what their roles and responsibilities are. This was something we heard from you all in 2019 when we met with you. So we have developed an infographic and a video. Later on today, Lynn will be demonstrating that video as well. Finally, a bittersweet staff announcement, if I may. Your staff and our colleague, Abdul Mohammed, is retiring tomorrow. Abdul joined COG in 1988 as a transportation engineer, and he has worked for more than 32 years, supporting a wide range of projects and initiatives. Abdul conducted the travel monitoring, field data collection, supported regional travel demand modeling, and he leaves an important legacy of managing the Baltimore-Washington Regional Air Passenger Survey and ground access planning activity. Abdul has quietly amassed an impressive career at COG, and in the process, we've all been fortunate to come to know Abdul not just as a skillful engineer, which he is, but more importantly, as a trusted colleague and a caring friend to all. Abdul's commitment to teamwork and integrity has made a lasting impression on our organization. And so on behalf of you and all of my colleagues, I want to thank Abdul for his 32 years of service to TPB and COG, and we wish him the very best in his retirement. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Kanti. And on all of us, please extend our gratitude and congratulations to Abdul. I wish we were together so we could bring him into the well and do a plaque and a big round of applause, but so please feel the virtual applause and gratitude for such a many years. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to turn to questions. I had one quick question myself, Kanti. Is there anything that you have around the enhanced mobility additional funds, the 590? Is there a timeline or a certain restriction in terms of how quickly those dollars in that program has to be put in place?
Yes, we attended a webinar that the FTA hosted last week to tell us about, because this was the first time they were doing it. And the good news is the FTA has said you can follow the usual procedure, but however have identified a number of exemptions that we can use so that the funding can be distributed as expeditiously as possible. So based on that webinar from yesterday, we are putting together a plan proposal, which I plan to bring to you next month. And we should be able to begin the solicitation and awarding the projects right away. That's the idea, to try and get that money right away.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much. All right, let me turn. Anybody else from the district? All right, questions for Kanti. Let me turn to Maryland.
This is Earl, not a question, but related to the TCI initiative. As we've been doing for almost the last 2 years, the executive leadership team and executive committee is still meeting pretty much every Monday, as we work toward developing the model rule in the coming months. So it's still ongoing. and most of the states that did not join on right now are still actively involved and supportive of the effort. So we're still moving forward.
Great. Thank you, Earl. Anybody else from Maryland? All right, let me turn to Virginia. And then WMATA and any other agencies. All right, thank you, Conti, appreciate that. Next, we'll turn to the chairman's remarks, which means I get to recognize myself. This is the second time that I'm now chairing this board, and I could not help but notice that each time it appears that I'm being handed the baton to take a new initiative into its implementation phase. So I'm not sure what you think of me with that. Last time it was January 2018, and I followed the excellent work of Bridget Newton's role as chair as I was handed the task of kicking off the implementation phase of our aspirational initiative following the work that this board did with its long-range plan task force. That was to be done in 2018, the update of the TPB's long-range plan. And this time, of course, in January 2021, I now follow the outstanding work of Kelly Russell and have been handed the task of more fully integrating considerations of equity and diversity and inclusivity into the transportation planning and programming activities of this board. And of course, once again, we'll be working on the 2022 update to the TPB long-range plan. Additionally, something that has been handed to all of us is to work on doing our very best to aid in the recovery from the disruptions and the setbacks that have been caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is an area where I think we can provide very strong leadership and vision, not just for our individual jurisdictions that we represent, but for the region as a whole. The survival, the resilience, the resurgence of WMATA, the fast changing nature of what we call a work commute and what it means anymore, and the likely opportunity, as our incoming Transportation Secretary Buttigieg said this morning, of a generational opportunity on transportation investment. Maybe that also means that we'll finally get to see that infrastructure week that we've been promised for a long time. All of these are going to be on our plate and on our horizon this year, and I think really has just immense opportunity. And while there are many observations one could make examining the disruption to mobility this pandemic has caused, two things stand out to me. One, how a relatively small reduction in peak period demand can significantly reduce congestion, reduce energy consumption, and improve air quality. And two, how precarious the state of public transportation is, both its funding and how disruptive and inequitable changes to public transportation service levels can be for our residents, especially for those that are transit dependent, and particularly those that rely on bus service. I would very much like for us to keep those two themes on our radar this year. I know that for all of us this year, we'll be working with our own councils and boards on recovery, and I've asked Conti to engage all of our committees in this work of subject matter experts to assist in figuring out the best way that TPB can be of assistance. I suspect 2021 is going to have two distinct phases to it. First, the part where personal and public health issues are put on the path of recovery through vaccinations. And then the second part, when our work towards recovery really kicks into high gear, recovering our economy and our way of life in general. We will have to stay focused to ensure that our recovery actions address the inequities that have been highlighted and exposed in the past year, and also brings a renewed sense of commitment to other urgent matters that we face, such as sustainable and affordable mobility and accessibility. We must have a resilient transportation system that is able to respond to social and political disruptions and the impacts of climate change. One of the pleasures I have in this term is to nominate an elected official colleague from this board as chair of the TPB's Access for All Advisory Committee. Casey, as we all know, has served as the chair for the past 3 years, has done an outstanding job, and thank you again, Casey, for that incredible record of service and the hard work that went into that. And this year, it's my pleasure to nominate Kanik Aguirre from the city of Alexandria as the chair of the AFA. For those of you who may not know, Kanik is the first Latino Alexandria City Council member. Currently in his first term, Kanik serves as the chair of the City of Alexandria's 2020 Census Complete Count Committee, vice chair of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, and was appointed to the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority Board of Directors as an alternate in March of 2020. In his professional capacity, he works to increase access to care and improve health outcomes for Medicaid populations throughout Northern Virginia. So Kanik, thank you very kindly for accepting this additional responsibility at the TPB. Now we'll move to our action. Yeah, big round of applause. All right. Now, as we'll move to our Seventh item, the approval of the 2021 appointments to the TPB's CAC. This is our only action item for today, and it is an important one. We will be appointing a new slate of members to an expanded Community Advisory Committee. I and the two vice chairs worked on this task with the assistance from the TPB staff over the past month, and we have a recommended list of 24 candidates. A memo was included in the read-ahead packet for everyone. I'll ask Brian Hayes on staff to review the memo and the process. After that, I will first ask for a motion to approve the recommendations and a second. I'll then open up for any questions or comments before calling for a vote. So let's see. First, Brian, do I need to recognize you?
Thank you, Chair Allen, and good afternoon, TPB. It is my pleasure to share the TPB officer nominations for the 2021-2022 Community Advisory Committee. In my short presentation, I will describe our recruitment process and let you know a bit about the applications that we received. I will also share the names of the nominations and encourage you to vote for their approval. Next slide. From November to December, TPB staff worked with members of the technical committee and board members to encourage residents from across the region to apply to serve on the CAC. This was a shorter recruitment window than usual, but during that time we received 41 applications from 15 member jurisdictions. 29 of these applications have not served on the CAC in the past, 12 are returning CAC members, and 15 applicants graduated from the TPB's Community Leadership Institute. We received 13 applications from people who live in equity emphasis areas. Ultimately, with the help of the board and the technical committee, staff were able to gather applications that better capture the Washington region's diversity than ever before. As a result, staff are really excited about the group of nominations that we'll share on the next slide. This list of 24 nominations were selected by TPB officers to serve a 2-year term starting February 2021 and ending in December of 2022. These TPB officer nominations were made in consultation with TPB staff who applied a selection criteria to identify a diverse and capable group. I encourage you to refer to the memo to learn a little bit more about each of these members. But having shared that, I now turn it over to the board to discuss and approve this membership.
Thank you, Brian. All right, so first we need to actually make a motion to approve the new members to the Community Advisory Committee. I'll do that, and after that, we'll then do the officers. So first, is there a motion to approve the new members of the Community Advisory Committee? Please state your name and jurisdiction.
I move to approve. Pam Stabeski, Manassas City.
And I'll
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Bridget. All right, with that, let me call for a vote. And remember, as you vote, you are, I'm only going to be asking for nays and abstentions. And I certainly hope there's none for this. First, the District of Columbia. Hearing none, let me turn to Maryland. Hearing none, let me turn to Virginia. Hearing none, and let me turn to WMATA and other federal agencies. Hearing none. Thank you very much. This is approved unanimously. And now, as chair of the TPB, I have the privilege of selecting one of the members of this new committee now to chair the CAC this year. And I've selected Elisa Walton, who's from the District of Columbia, and more specifically from Ward 6, as the CAC chair. I believe she's going to do a very good job, and as we heard earlier, build upon some really great work from the work by the CAC last year. The committee will hold its first meeting next month, and then at our February meeting, we'll then be able to hear from her in the report. So with that, let me, well, actually, wait, Brian, do I need to vote on that, or are these just the immense powers of the chair? I just get to name who the chair is.
Those are your immense powers as chair. Thank you so much.
I'm going to be drunk with power. This is amazing. Okay, great. Well, then, so it is. Thank you very much. All right, with that, we'll now move to item number 8, our information items. This is the first of 3 informational items for today. I spoke earlier about the disruption of COVID-19 pandemic and what it's caused in our region. Tim Kanan on staff will brief us on a multi-sectional analysis that will examine the impacts on transportation, the environment, the economy, and health. This is going to be a look back at 2020, and it's going to provide a regional perspective on pandemic impacts that are going to then inform long-term planning and programming activities. I think that a pandemic recovery will necessarily influence a lot of our work this year, and data like this is going to be really important as we think about the policies to help the region and each of our communities recover. I want to thank the TPB staff for doing this research, and I look forward to continuing to examine our pandemic recovery throughout this year. Tim, the floor is yours. Let me turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's great to be here with you today. This is a carryover item that was unfortunately deferred from last month. So there was a memo and a PowerPoint presentation included in your packet last month, as well as this month. But I do want to just point out that some of the slides in the PowerPoint presentation in this month's packet have been updated a little bit with newer data. I'll give a quick overview about what we're doing, then I'll show a video, and then I'll go through some of the slides that we have, if that's okay. Numerous actions have been taken to contain the pandemic here, and to mitigate the threat to both personal and public health. And these actions have resulted in restricted socioeconomic activity and travel, including here in the metropolitan area. And to take a look at that, staff from the entire organization, the Council of Governments, as well as TPB staff, are looking to collaborate to develop a snapshot summary of what we're observing to be the impacts, not necessarily predicting the future recovery just yet, but to really understand what are the impacts in the region from a multi-sectoral perspective. We believe that it's not sufficient to simply look at these impacts through a transportation lens or an economic lens per se, but rather to look at it more holistically through a health lens, economy, transportation, and the environment. These findings, while empirical, are really intended to provide a general context understanding of the impacts and are not really intended to constitute a deep dive yet at this point, due primarily to the availability of detailed data. These analysis will measure what has occurred and will not be predictive. And we're really looking at these presentations to sort of be bundled into two categories. One are the near-term activities, and those are readily available data that can be presented to stakeholders starting right now in December and January. And then we'll continue to build on this and collect data as it becomes more available so we can take a deeper dive in longer term activities to try to derive some insights and understanding of what we might anticipate for the recovery. So with that, I'm going to try to share my screen with a video, and wish me luck. Hopefully you hear the video. Bear with me while I try to get back on track here. Fortunately, I'm having difficulty sharing it with the screen. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to share once again. So hopefully you see my slides here. I do want to just, what I have here are slides that align with the primary findings that were presented in the video, presented by these various 4 sectors that we're examining. The first is from a health standpoint. The first slide shows the total number of cases as well as the deaths in the region. And the red slide area shows the number of cases in the region. And the gray the gray chart shows the number of deaths. And as you can see, that there was a large spike in the very beginning in terms of the number of cases, but that decreased a little bit in the late spring throughout the summer. But then, of course, as we all know from understanding in the news, that there's just a huge spike in the number of cases in the region, and as well as a subsequent increase in the number of deaths going on. So I just want to set that from the context. But when we really look at what impact this is having from an economic standpoint, historically, the Washington region has always tended to enjoy lower unemployment rates compared to the nation as a whole. And the chart that I'm presenting now shows 2 lines. The black line is the national unemployment rate, and the blue line is the regional unemployment rate. And from November 2019 to March of 2020, we were pretty much tracking along that line. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, there was a significant impact to the global, national, certainly the regional economy in terms of the job market. Lots of job losses occurred and lots of people filed for unemployment. That was especially noticeable, disproportionately higher in the nation compared to the region. But during the time of recovery, somewhat in the late spring to the summer, those lines started to converge, whereas in October, our unemployment rate was about the same as the nation. Since then, we do observe once again that the regional unemployment rate is a little bit lower than the national trend. One of the hardest hit sectors in our economy was leisure and hospitality. The dark blue bars show the primary sectors that we examine, and the lighter blue bars are subsectors within that. But that really shows that from November 19 to November 20, significant losses were occurred in all sectors in the region, most felt especially in leisure and hospitality. I do note that there is a slight increase in federal employment during that time, and we believe that that is attributable to seasonal census workers. We conducted, our Computer Connections program conducted a survey of employers in this database last spring. We do this every year, but we added some questions regarding their actions and anticipations with respect to COVID-19. And what we found, this is a fairly low responded to survey, so we really view this as a focus group as opposed to a statistically significant survey finding. But we did learn that 96% of all the employers in this database reported that they shut down either completely or went to a reduced site operations promoting teleworking at the onset of the pandemic. And then asking these same employers, what are their plans for once the pandemic is over? More than half say that they will continue to offer teleworking either at post-pandemic or not quite to pre-pandemic levels. So we see that more than half of employers do intend to continue offering teleworking to some degree that they would not go back to pre-pandemic levels. Roadway traffic volumes in the region, we've seen a big decrease in the March, April, and May timeframe, and we've all experienced this. And we look at this, generally the acceptance is that this would be attributable to a lot of fortunate people like myself who have been able to continue to work, but telework and not have to report to the office as a result. But one thing that's important to keep in mind, in light of some of the slides I already showed with respect to unemployment, a lot of the decreases in trips are not trips that are not necessarily not being made by people like me who still can work, but are people who would like to work but have lost their jobs and are not taking those trips. So it's important not to lose sight of that important component in this region. Since the significant decrease in traffic volumes in the springtime, we have seen recovery in the months. It's been variable, and we've seen a little bit of, we did notice most recently in November, a little bit decrease once again in traffic volumes in the region. This has varied throughout the region from the central jurisdictions to the inner suburbs and to the outer suburbs. And those slides are included in this packet, but I probably won't get to those specifically today. In terms of public transportation, Metro Rail and Transit, similarly, there were significant decreases during the same time frame in Metro Rail and Metro Bus ridership. I do want to point out that it's very important to interpret this data a little bit differently than we would just looking at decreased traffic volumes in the region. Decreases in the use of public transportation, while very much caused by decreases in demand, are also in part a function of decreases in service capacity or service operations. Then this slide presents a visualization of that, where transit providers have had to implement social distancing requirements within their vehicles, as well as reduce services in some areas. So even though the demand may have gone down for public transportation, there's also a component that should be considered, that the service availability may not have been what it needed to be for some riders to take advantage of public transportation. Within local and commuter transit, we notice a similar trend. This slide compares the percent of service levels of the different regional bus providers. And what we see is that the commuter buses experience the biggest decreases in terms of ridership, while some of the local buses did decrease as well, but not quite by as much. And we really think that what's driving that is the decreased demand for work-related trips that are offered almost exclusively by the commuter buses. Air travel, there's no surprise here. This slide compares 2019 levels in the blue line to 2020 levels, which is in the orange line. And in the springtime, again, there was a significant decrease in the number of enplanements at the region's 3 airports, that Washington, Baltimore, Washington, Dulles, and Reagan National Airports. We have seen recovery since then somewhat, but at far lower levels than what we did experience in 2019. One of the other sectors we're looking at is the environment. While there has been a lot of decreased travel, a lot of decreased economic activity, we also have seen some improvement in some of the things we are looking at in this region that are important environmental considerations. From the ozone and PM 2.5 particulate matter in the region, we saw that we had far more healthier days in 2020 compared to 2019. A similar visualization to this, this chart also does show not just PM 2.5 and ozone, but all of the criteria pollutants that we look at in the aggregate. And this shows a line chart from 2011 through 2020. And we see a lot more red and orange early in this period, and a lot more green in the 2020 timeframe. So over time, during the year, we have noticed cleaner air in this region as a result. Similarly, in that period, in the first part of the year, from the March through June, we did see decreases in our greenhouse gas estimates, 40% average reduction on the roadway sector, about an 8-point average reduction with electricity, and a 65% average reduction in the aviation sector, which was confirmed by an earlier slide that I showed with respect to aircraft enplanements. I want to stop here at this point to give committee members a chance to ask any questions if there are any, but we'll continue to take a deep dive into this. As data become more available, we will be looking more closely at this. It's hard to get fine-grained details so soon into this period. We do expect that to start coming forward in more numerous and more frequently. But as we do, we'll continue to update this presentation, expand it where appropriate, and continue to come back to this board as well as all the boards associated with council of governments and their committees and subcommittees. I do want to note that there are other slides in the beyond in the package that does take a deeper dive into some of the indicators that we do have. But Mr. Chairman, I'll stop here and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Tim, thank you very much. And I certainly encourage all my colleagues to read through those additional slides where that deeper dive is. One quick question I had before I jurisdictions, Tim, is the intention that you would you're saying periodically go through a deeper dive on the data that has been collected through the course of this year, or is it that you're going to be able to collect additional information and data sets into this as we go through this year to help monitor and then help guide policy?
That's a great question, and the answer is both, I hope. Certainly we'll continue to, I think the set of slides that we have for now represent a really good benchmark or baseline to track over time. So we certainly want to commit to updating that so we can monitor the progression during this period. But as more data do become available and as more research questions do become identified and we have the ability to take that deeper dive and to enrich this research, we certainly intend to do that as well.
Okay, great. Very glad to hear that. I think especially noting how much of, I think, our work, both individually and collectively over the next year is going to be around recovery and thinking through the different ways in which we work on that. I think we'd probably benefit from maybe even a quarterly update on the latest information analysis, just to be able to have that be something that is kind of recurring for us, that then helps us. Again, I'm going to wager it'll be helpful for everybody on their individual roles in their own jurisdictions, as well as collectively across the region. But let me turn to questions. I've been trying to alternate the order so that it's not always DC first, although let's be honest, DC's first. Let me turn to WMATA, any other agencies for the first crack here.
Thank you, Chair Allen. I just wanted to thank staff and particularly Tim for kind of reformulating the way they were approaching the COVID analysis and promising these updates as they move forward in these deeper dives. I think they'll provide a lot of us fascinating information and hopefully give us something we can work with in determining policy and approaches to change. I just want to note additional things for looking out that the transit impacts are as much as a matter of supply as they are demand. And unfortunately, I know that's not in the video, but at least it's in the slides that go with it. So thank you there. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Mark. All right, let me turn to Virginia.
Mr. Chair, Dave Snyder, I had a couple questions. First of all, your comment about DC first, I think we're all first. Anyway, really, what I'm interested in is what do we do with this data moving forward in terms of our transportation planning? I mean, as the data is presented, obviously there are positive and negatives. The positive is air quality is improved. The positive is those who can work remotely are working remotely. It seems to me both of those are positives. The negatives are obviously high levels of unemployment in the hospitality industry. And it's kind of a mixed situation on the highways where people are driving less miles, but the safety hasn't really improved much. In fact, in some places around the country, the fatality rate has actually gone up. And then you've got the transit pictures. So to me, I think we've got to start figuring out, okay, which of these trends do we want to support? Which of these trends do we want to reverse? And how can transportation policy support both of those objectives? And again, I think we can only start by thinking about, okay, what's good about this, what's bad about it, and then begin to think about strategies to support the good aspects, and then strategies, perhaps even new ones, to address the negatives. I'm thinking electrification of the vehicle fleet is one thing from a technological standpoint we ought to be thinking about. In addition, what else can the region do to support teleworking for those who have that option and employers who want their employees to telework? So these are the kinds of things that I'll be interested in all of us collectively thinking through at a local level as well as a regional level. Just a couple initial thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Any other questions from Virginia? All right, let me turn to Maryland now.
Hi. Betty here. For me, as the person that kind of represents the epicenter of the COVID-19 crisis, I'm very interested in the racial breakdown of who's infected, right? Right now, we have the highest, at least in the zip code that I live in right here, we have the highest number of contracted cases across the entire region. And so the racial breakdown for me of who's contracting and who's passing away is really important. And then, and I know that's kind of outside of the scope a little bit of the TPB, but I think when we start to look at that, we start to look at who is the most affected, right? Like who's contracting it the most, who's dying the most. And if we're really being serious about it, I know that in Fairfax, I know that there was some news casting regarding the fact that Latinos were number one there, similar out in Montgomery County, similar in across the state of Maryland. If we start to look at the numbers of those people who have historically unidentified their race, and typically that happens amongst Latinos, that they don't necessarily say what race they are because they don't understand that concept in the United States. And so they don't tend to answer that. But overwhelmingly, we know historically 3 to 5 times African Americans are also very high and have also been very affected. But I also think that we need to overlap that with the unemployment numbers by zip code, if we can get to that, because that lets us know also who has been the most affected by zip code. If we can tell by a map basis by zip code what's the racial breakdown on that zip code, I mean, it's not necessarily causality, but it can give us some kind of, it could give us some type of correlation between those individuals, the racial breakdown by zip code, as well as the racial breakdown of who is unemployed.
Councilmember, if I can, I was going to see if we could draw in Chuck Bean, actually, from the leadership of COG overall, because as you noted, there's so many intersections here. COG, Chuck, I didn't know if you had any thoughts just from the COG leadership perspective of helping bring together that health data and some of the other pieces into the overall picture, and just share some of the work that COG has been doing on this that might be responsive to the council's questions.
Yeah, use your ultimate power, Chuck Bean.
What was that?
Use your ultimate power, Chuck Bean.
Thank you, Councilmember Taveras. I think your question is looking at the geography of impact, particularly on infection rates and on death, and in that geography, the racial impact, racial disparity impact. Then you said unemployment. We've had speakers before the COG board from the American Public Health Association. This is particularly early on, kind of a early warning about the racial disparity in COVID infection, COVID death rate. So we would be happy to follow up with you on those speakers. Staff supports the chief health officers of the region, and in non-COVID, non-Ebola, non-Zika determinants of health, which and our staff can follow up with you about some of the work of social determinants of health from health officers. And I'll have our staff to get a more recent picture of that. But the chief health officers COG board will follow up with you some of those details.
No, thank you. No, I'm just, because I think if we're asking what can we do or what, I mean, I think that as we try to determine how to funnel resources, we want to also look at those individuals that are the most affected, right? And we want to target it to those areas that are the most affected to figure out what can we do in terms of access to transportation, whatever it is that we want to come up and think about and get the buy-in from the group. So that's just.
Well, thank you, Councilmember. I know I've got a couple more people to line up, so I wanted to turn to Evan Glass. I saw your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate Councilmember Taveras' question and just want to follow up on that. I think this data is really, really important. Clearly, I've been looking at it from the Montgomery County perspective. I've seen it written about in other threads, in the Post and other blogs. I'm wondering if we can try to extrapolate a little bit more and overlay it with some of that socioeconomic breakdown so that we can really see a clearer picture of what these trends mean in terms of our populations. And we know, quite frankly, that the federal workforce, much of the federal workforce is able to work from home, telecommute. We can extrapolate the demographics from that. And we know, quite frankly, who are transit dependent and who still have to go to work by taking the bus. And I think as all of us start entering into our budget season, particularly those of us in Maryland, I think having that information would be incredibly helpful to make the compelling cases to maintain some of our transportation services.
Great, thanks. Tim, can I turn to you to see if you can help answer, is that type of refinement within that data possible or things that we can work on?
It's certainly things we can work on. A lot of the data that do come out, especially on the economic side, come out with a pretty considerable lag. And those that come out first are usually at the regional level, if not just at the jurisdictional level. As we start getting other types of updates that we can drill down a little bit further, we can certainly do that, but it tends to be a lag. For example, it's very difficult to, there's no official labor force by small area, for example. We would need to figure out a methodology to extrapolate that somehow, but we can certainly take a deep dive as more becomes understood with updates from the American Community Survey on the demographic distribution throughout the region. We can look at that within the context of our equity emphasis areas, which of course we've defined to be areas of disproportionately higher concentrations of minority and low-income residents. We have tools that are available to us to start looking at that. And then as we continue to scan that and identify data needs or data gaps that we really want to fill, we can look at potentially collecting other either commercially available data or conducting additional services. So I saw there was a comment in the chat box about, now that the vaccines are out, this might be timely to start surveying employers once again. We can certainly start thinking about those data collection efforts in the future months as we start to do that.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Chair, I just have one technical question for Tim. I was looking through the follow-up slides, the addendum, if you will, and there are some that delineate between the core, the inner suburbs, and the outer suburbs. Is the core inside the Beltway? Is it the district? What is the core?
That's a great question. The core, we define the core as the District of Columbia, Arlington County, and the city of Alexandria. The inner suburbs tend to be those that are more focused in and around the Beltway, the large jurisdictions, Fairfax County, Montgomery, Prince George's County, and the small independent cities and communities in and around those areas. And the outer suburbs are, Loudoun and Prince William, Charles County, those outer jurisdictions. With the traffic volumes that we do collect, that is for the entire TPB modeled area, which extends beyond the planning area. So the outer ring of jurisdictions included in those roadway statistics include even jurisdictions that are farther out than just our planning area, but are part of our modeled area.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Next on the lineup, I had David Meyer and then Casey Kostick after that. Just from a timing standpoint, we still have 2 more informational items to go. So just want to be aware of the time as we want to make sure we get to those items too. But David, let me turn to you.
All right, thank you, Chair Allen. I just wanted to share with members of the TPB 2 items that might be of interest in the context of this discussion. Last week, we opened and made available 4 electric charging stations in our city, 2 at City Hall and 2 in our park, our downtown park of our historic district. All 4 of these charging stations were installed by the city with some leftover CMAQ money for $35,000 total. So it was really rather inexpensive. The most important thing is that these charging stations are free. And when you look at the data as to what is happening. It's not getting a lot of attention, but there is a significant transfer among the automotive industry in the United States towards electric vehicles. We all know that GM released its new logo this year, only the 5th time in its history, that will try to capture that EV market. And they're going to be investing over $27 billion in EV products by the end of 2025. By the end of 2025, there are going to be over 30 new models of electric vehicles in the United States. So it's not as if it's going to happen 10 or 15 years from now. It's probably in the next 5 to 7 years, a radical shift towards electric vehicles. So we were trying to get ahead of that and set the example by making at least 4 stations absolutely free. More to the equity issue, and this is really where I personally have a strong commitment. In April, well, let me back up and say that the city of Fairfax is a small jurisdiction, but we do have a very efficient and effective local bus system. And at the height of the pandemic in April and May, we still had over 600 riders a day on our bus system. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but for a small city, it's significant. These individuals who were riding these buses were riding the buses to work. They weren't on those buses to go to an art gallery. They were going on to work each day, to and from, because they don't have any other way to get to work. And they had to go physically to their jobs. And we, at that point, made the buses completely free, fare free. We did this to ensure that our bus drivers wouldn't be exposed to anyone else and to try to limit the exposure of everyone. So we were doing the right thing, but only partially for the right reason. For the people who are riding those buses, saving $2 each way, $4 a day times maybe 20 days a month, that's a significant amount of money for those individuals. And we are still providing completely free bus fare until this pandemic changes its course. I want to make those fares on the local buses permanently free for everyone in perpetuity. This will cost us about a little over a penny on the tax rate. There are differences of opinion among our elected leaders as to whether we should do this, but I see this as one of several key issues that we need to take towards a stronger social equity and economic justice for everyone in our community. And so I want us to be a leader in a very small jurisdiction towards a fare-free bus system that I would like to see adopted regionally. It will cost us money. It'll be a reallocation of public resources. But if there was ever an example of what we should be doing towards a more equitable approach to providing transportation services, I think this is it. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Thanks, David. I want to, again, just be aware of time. We've got 2 more items to go. I had Casey and Patrick both in the lineup here. So if we can, we'll try to keep it relatively brief. Casey and then Patrick.
Thank you, and I will be quite brief. Just want to underscore what others have said about equity and collecting the data on race and economic issues. I think that will be very, very important in our analysis. And I also just want to underscore that I think we have an opportunity here with the changes in behavior that we've seen during the pandemic, with more people teleworking, more people not driving, and as Mr. Meyer mentioned, free bus fares. And then conversely, on the negative side, people using public transit less to some extent. And I think if we wait, I think we will miss an opportunity, because as the recovery happens, people are going to find ways to get back to their jobs and do other things. And if their new mode of behavior is driving instead of taking public transit, that is going to be a lost opportunity for us. So I think we need to really be thinking now and planning ahead so we can take advantage and be ready to act as that happens and put things into place so that we have an opportunity to change behavior while there is really a great opportunity, because everyone's doing things new and in new ways. So I would love for us to think about how we can be active in leading that charge as it happens. And then quickly, I just want to also toss out, it seems to me there may be other MPOs around the country looking at similar questions. And I wonder if there are ways that we could also learn from things that other MPOs are finding in their data as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. Just on one quick point, I agree with you. This is one of those things where we can't run fast enough. So I'm with you on that. Tim, on Casey's last question, do you have any thoughts on that?
On other MPOs, well, as a matter of fact, the Transportation Resource Board is meeting starting at the end of this week and next week, and there are probably sessions. So that's at a minimum, we can start scanning what some activities other MPOs might be taking right now. But we can certainly reach out to our peer MPOs to find out what other data collection efforts they're doing to track this.
Thanks. All right, and Patrick, I'm going to turn to you. This is last question on this one, so that we can move to our next agenda item.
All right, I'll try to be brief, but I do think there's a big missing piece here, and that is how many people are turning to walking and biking during the pandemic, and how many people are able to safely be accommodated in walking and biking. Because I do think as people people who can't afford to drive, people who are wary about getting on transit because of the safety concerns or because of lack of access, and also of course walking and biking is a way to get to transit. So I do wonder, in terms of the fatalities, I think seeing that what seems to be this trend that people are driving less overall right now, but the people that are driving less safely. So the fact that that fatalities and incidents have stayed similar. How much of that is impacting biking and walking, and in terms of equity, I think it's important because walking and biking is a safe way to get outside that protects public health. So, what about disparities in terms of communities of color, low-income communities not having safe places to do that? I think that's a big factor in terms of those health disparities that we've been talking about. So, just throw a couple things out there quickly. But if staff can comment on that.
Mr. Chairman, I failed to mention a long list of people who helped me. I'm not going to mention their my name in the interest of time, but I will put their names in the chat just so everybody can understand that this was not me acting alone, and I was supported by a host of other people who helped us out.
All right, thanks everyone. I want to try to keep us moving on from an agenda standpoint. But I think this was obviously an incredibly important topic that I know we are all deeply interested in, again, both individually and collectively. So I think it was a really great discussion and questions. But with that, let's step now into item number 9 on our agenda, which is somewhat related, which is our regional travel survey briefing, changed and observed trips since 2007, 2008. So while that was looking back at last year, this item obviously is going to be looking back at the last decade. Given that we are a long-term planning body, it's important that we look at changes to travel behavior over the long period as well. Dr. Ken Joe on staff will highlight some of the changes observed in our region by comparing the data from TPB's 2017-2018 regional travel survey to a similar survey that had been conducted in 2007 and 2008. So Ken, let me turn it over to you. And Ken, I don't know if I see a screen, but we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Oh, started to hear something. Maybe that was just Conti.
Is he on mute?
Yes. Now, Ken is speaking. We are unable to hear him. Maybe there's an audio difficulty.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair.
Ken, we can't hear you.
Perhaps we can go to the next item and then
Sure.
we'll work with Ken to get this back.
All right, good suggestion there, Conti. All right, so we're going to skip 9 for the moment. We will turn to item 10, the Unified Planning Work Program Simplified. We like that, Lynn. This is our second to last item, obviously, because we'll come back to number 9. So as we begin our new year with some new members, and as we begin to develop our work program for the upcoming fiscal year, Lynn Erickson on staff will provide us a brief overview of the TPB, its roles and responsibilities, and services provided to its members. This is background information, a preamble to receiving the draft FY 2022 Unified Planning Work Program next month at our February meeting. So Lynn, let me turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Chair Allen.
Testing.
Sorry. Anyway, I'm just going to keep going, right? So,
You keep going, Lynn.
Chair Allen, after last month's board interactions, you know, the urges versus requires conversation, I bet some of you are wondering, where does the authority for the TPB come from? Look around our pretend table or maybe even our participant list. We have Governor Earl Lewis. We have Governor Maria Sinner. We have Mayor Leslie Rupert. It comes from the states in part. So hold that thought for a minute. I'll get back to that. So Sergio, go ahead to the next slide, please. So this year, we're going to take a slightly different approach as we present the staff workload for fiscal 2022. So anyone who's new to the TPB, the Unified Planning Work Program is our annual budget, and it's the document where everything staff does and plans to do lives. This month, we are going to talk about the basic MPO requirements, which is essentially how you can navigate the process and get the most out of your time with us. And I will also elaborate on what we can and frankly can't do as an MPO. The takeaway from today's presentation is that I hope you will be reminded of the many federal requirements that we are responsible for together as a region in a continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive manner, and that every effort is made to try to synchronize board interests with our required products. The board will be asked to approve our UPWP in March. Next slide, please. All right, so what exactly does the Metropolitan Transportation Planning process focus on? So you're likely most familiar with your local and programming processes. And in Virginia, there are sub-regional activities. The TPB does not participate in project development activities. The TPB does not look at individual projects. We do, however, look at them all together at the same time. You may also be familiar with the federal statewide planning process, which is federally scripted similar to our process, and it's led by the DOTs. For example, Virginia is currently working on their long-range plan called VTrans. DDOT's plan called Move DC is also under development. There are many other sub-regional entities that conduct planning and programming activities, like NVTA, NVTC, WMATA, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. They all have their own rules, boards even, and responsibilities, and I call them sub-regional because they all come together here at the TPB at the metropolitan regional scale. If any of these local, sub-regional, or state agencies want to spend federal funding, or if their projects impact air quality, then they have to be part of our process. It's the separate regional, federal metropolitan transportation planning process that we focus on here at TPB. We do understand that it sometimes is a struggle to think that big, as some of your agencies really are not that big. But in the end, we do ask you to think regionally and act locally back at home. And staff is here to help you. Next slide, please. The mission, if you will, of an MPO has largely been defined for us by the feds. It's to implement the Federal Metropolitan Transportation Planning Process, 23 CFR Part 450 Subpart C, blah, 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 right? We serve as a representative group of local stakeholders. We carry out the 3C process. It's a continuing process. It never stops. It's a cooperative process. It's consensus-based, and it's comprehensive. It's multimodal and multidisciplinary. We are required to develop a long-range plan and a short-range transportation improvement program. We are required to apply a specific air quality conformity analysis on the projects in both. We are also required to engage in performance-based planning and programming, which is the application of performance management principles to achieve desired performance outcomes for the multimodal transportation system. These requirements also specify how to develop these products and what needs to be in them. We also work in conjunction with state air and transportation agencies to meet Federal Clean Air Act standards in accordance with 40 CFR Part 93. Okay, great. So we have all these rules to follow, but what does that actually mean? So the process is supposed to shape what goes into those plans and programs. Let me say that again. The process is supposed to shape what goes into those plans and programs. So this means taking your projects that were developed at the local, the sub-regional, or even the state level, and looking at them through our regional lens, using our regionally established policies, including the TPB vision, the Regional Transportation Priorities Plan, our aspirational initiatives, and an equity lens, and providing that information to you as the implementing agencies to use as those projects move forward and as you are making decisions about what project to fund next. For example, the $300 billion that we forecasted to be spent in our region over the next 25 years in Visualize 2045, or more immediately, the $23.8 billion that you have programmed in our TIP, which is money that is already approved by your agencies to be spent. Well, not a dime of that funding can flow or be spent in our region without our process. So back to my earlier point about our process, about where does the authority come from? Governor Earl, Governor Maria, Mayor Leslie. So technically, the MPO designation is made by the governor and units of general purpose local government that together represent at least 75% of the affected population. Of course, our friends here are designated on behalf of the secretaries to represent the states, just like the rest of you are representing your agencies and jurisdictions. So this map here shows you who we are. The requirement is to plan for the urbanized area, which you see shaded here. Next slide, please, Sergio. We have 44 members. We are the 9th largest MPO in the nation in population and the 16th largest in planning area. As part of the 3C process, we do 3 main things here at the TPB. We prepare plans and programs that the federal government must approve in order for federal aid transportation funding to flow to our region. We provide technical resources for consensus building and decision making, and we provide a forum for regional coordination. So, as you know, we have a lot of federal checkboxes that must be checked. However, there are also opportunities to synchronize board interests along with those federal regulations. One example is our focus on the aspirational element of our plan, where all the work from our long-range plan task force, along with our other policies like our recent resolution on equity, now provide a clear focus for our federally required plan. So I'm reminding you of all these duties because these are some of the things we need to focus on as we prepare our staff workload for the next year. Next slide, please. So how do we plan and document the staff workload for the next year? We do that through the Unified Planning Work Program. This is the document that defines how we carry out MPO activities and what they are. It basically serves as the TPB staff work scope for the upcoming fiscal year. It's only one of a few documents that the USDOT actually approves, and it provides the federal authority to draw down the federal funding so staff can conduct the process and keep the transportation system funded. So we need to get this right. Next slide, please. So next month, I'm going to spend some time highlighting proposed UPWP revenues and expenditures. Right now, we start our budget process, assuming that we will get the same amount of funding to spend again this coming year. And we can reasonably make that assumption because there is only one way to spend metropolitan transportation funding. It automatically comes to MPOs like us. However, unlike other MPOs in the United States, we actually only get the bare minimum amount of funding, and that funding is wholly directed to conducting the metropolitan transportation planning process. So as I mentioned before, we try very hard to synchronize board interests with our federal requirements, but there are clear limits to what we can do. So MPO expenditures, what are you getting for your money? And I deliberately say your money because everyone at the table at least provides a 10% match based on population. You can also feel free to thank one of our governors or mayor around our pretend table for picking up a larger tab than the rest of you. They pay 10% on behalf of the whole state, and then the federal government picks up the last 80%. So first off, we are essentially staff to you, the board members. There are about 50 of the finest technical and professional staff in the field who draw salaries from the UPWP, ready to jump through hoops for you with technical advice on any number of transportation planning topics. We are also blessed with the role of keeping you on point to meet the federal requirements, and there are a whole lot of federal requirements baked into our products and processes, as I keep mentioning. And slide 7 here tries to summarize how all of our work fits together, all while making sure we keep our federal and state oversight partners happy. We spend a lot of our resources generating data and information, quality checking it, and flowing it, if you will, just follow the arrows, between and among our various products. The next few slides highlight benefits that we provide to you, our members. If you recall from earlier, we do a few main things here. Probably the most visible to you is that we meet federal regs. So your $23.8 billion worth of your projects in the TIP, that's funding that's already been approved by local and state authorities. So those projects can be implemented. We also provide a forum for regional coordination, and we provide technical resources for decision making. So this month, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we call ongoing activities. And in February, I'll come back and highlight the new activities we'll be undertaking in fiscal 2022. Next slide, please. Now for the fun stuff, what we do every year. So this is our committee and subcommittee structure. We utilize our 14 subcommittees to help us disseminate data, information, and products to make sure we are on the right track with the needs of our members. Most visibly, we are a forum for regional coordination. All of our tasks contain some amount of coordination activities. This means bringing staff from 44 member agencies and jurisdictions together for meetings, and it's also working within our agency to more fully utilize our strengths across our teams. We spend a lot of time organizing and hosting these various subject matter expert committees, not only to help us check our federal boxes, but to provide you with opportunities you wouldn't otherwise have. The single best way to navigate our process is to pay attention to what is going on at the committees. And of course, reading our TPB News blog post. We are hoping that you meet regularly with your technical committee rep, not only because they are some of the smartest people around, but that's where we dive into a lot greater detail than what is presented to you with the board. And here's also another little tidbit. Every action item appears twice on the board agenda. First is a heads up, and then the next month for approval. If staff is aware of potential issues, we try our best to help explain what those issues or changes are to further help you out. Next slide, please. The TPB funds and implements regional programs by providing consultant services to members in 3 programs. We seek to enhance transportation and land use coordination through our Transportation and Land Use Connections Program, or TLC, where we support planning for vibrant and accessible communities. This technical assistance program has provided our jurisdictions with consultant support for 145 projects since 2007 for nearly $6 million. A good example of synchronizing board interests is how we developed our next program, as we are starting up our new regional roadway safety program this year. Through our performance-based planning and programming safety discussions, safety was identified as a priority, and we are able to carve out a niche to start to address what we can. TPB implements programs on behalf of its members. We promote transportation alternatives through our Commuter Connections program, our bicycle and pedestrian programs, and through our responsibilities for the Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside program. The TPB offers 2 federal grant opportunities. One is the Transportation Alternatives Set-Aside program, or TAP. TPB has selected 126 projects for DC, Maryland, and Virginia since 2014 for a total of over $47.5 million. And this year, we expect the TPB will select and approve more than $8 million in projects. Through our other federal grant opportunity, we have solicited, selected, and contributed funding to over 71 enhanced mobility projects totaling over $25 million. And we'll do another solicitation this year. Together, that's almost $80 million worth of projects that TPB has selected for the region. As a forum for coordination, we plan to continue semi-annual workshops on micromobility and other topics, as this rapidly evolving area generates exceptional interest among jurisdictions and as new rules and regulations come into effect. Next slide, please. As a forum for regional coordination, we are strategically set up to facilitate and implement various regional initiatives. For example, one of Chairman Allen's priority areas is mitigating climate change, which is part of our mobile emissions planning activities. We plan to finish the climate change mitigation study, which is just starting now, whose goal is to analyze ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in line with COG, TPB, and regional targets for 2030 and 2050. Furthermore, we will continue to monitor developments related to the Transportation and Climate Initiative, or TCI. Next slide, please. We have our complete streets policy. We provide the opportunity to have other policy discussions. Our emergency preparedness and management and operations activities include planning activities in support of our MATOC program and follow-up activities after COG's Traffic Incident Management Enhancement Initiative. Next slide, please. Here are some examples of the technical resources we provide. We provide travel monitoring and travel trends analysis, travel demand forecasting, mobile emissions planning, and we support multimodal initiatives. We are developing the Generation 3 travel model, which will be TPB's next generation travel demand forecasting model. This model is being developed over a 3-year period between fiscal 20 through 23. Each year, we get 50 to 70 requests for the regional travel demand forecasting model, its inputs or its outputs. We are moving towards data-driven performance outcomes. We provide travel, traffic, and demographic analysis and data sets and visualizations. We provide a variety of communications tools to help us and to help you get the word out, including our biweekly TPB News publication, and our active social media presence, including the infographics and videos we've developed that you can use to help describe what you do at TPB. So as Conti mentioned earlier and is in your packet, I've included our latest infographic. And it's a super pretty, super short, nifty document that summarizes TPB's activities. It's your TPB cheat sheet. So I really recommend that you keep it handy and share it with your boards and agencies. And a special thank you to our staffer, Sarah Bond, for her Adobe InDesign talents. So last slide, please. So our next steps are to develop the revenues and expenditures, and we'll come back to you next month with a document for review. There's a lot that goes into that document, but I've posted a memo which includes the part of the UPWP that describes the specific staff work activities for your review and comment. It's the meat, if you will, of the UPWP. So it will all get wrapped up into the big document that you will have for review next month. Our February presentation is going to highlight the revenues and expenditures and be more specific about the projects that we are undertaking. We will also be identifying which activities that we won't be able to finish at the end of this fiscal year, and we'll take steps to roll them over into the new 2022 UPWP. We call that carryover funding. So after board approval in March, we submit it to our federal partners and work begins on July 1st. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to take questions.
All right, thanks so much, Lynn. Quick note for everybody, since it's basically we only have about 10 minutes until 2. Conti and I were texting back and forth. What we're going to do, we did figure out the audio for Ken's presentation, but what we'll do is we'll actually move that to February, because there's no way we'd be able to have that presentation and be able to answer questions in less than 10 minutes. So I think the conversation we had on the earlier piece was so robust and helpful, well worth the time spent on that, but we're just going to bump Ken's to next month. So with that, though, let me turn to any questions for Lynn. Any questions from the district? All right, hearing none, let me turn to Maryland. Hearing none, let me turn to Virginia.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Dave
Yes.
Snyder, thanks for the presentation. I think this body does an extraordinary amount of work, and the staff really world-class work. I think my question goes to a deeper issue, which is the government structure between the decisions that are made at the project level and policy provided at the board level. Oftentimes there's a disconnect. I got to be honest about this. There's a disconnect, and either we're wrong, or the projects are wrong, or nobody's wrong, or everybody's wrong. So I guess my question is, going forward, how do we strengthen the governance system so that there's better conformance between this board and the actual projects that we see, recognizing the fact that, with the exception of DC, we are just regions of the larger state. So recognizing this, do other MPOs have a better, I'm going to call it, governance structure to get it all working as a whole, rather than some disconnects that we see, that I've seen in the past? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Ms. Allen, I'm happy to chime in. I think, as Mr. Snyder knows, TPB is a member of the National Association of MPOs. And as Lynn said, we are the ninth largest MPO. And we participate in their technical committee, in their steering committee, and we have also been on their board in the past. So we are constantly working with larger multi-state MPOs as well, to try and see what best practices we can share, what we can learn from them. And one of the things that we have noticed in large areas, particularly, there are not very many tri-state MPOs nationally. There are only about, of the 420, 425 MPOs, there are only about 40 or so large MPOs, and of them, maybe 10 or 12 are multi-state. Very few are tri-state MPOs. So we are constantly working with them to try and see how they facilitate and get their say into the decision making at the local levels. one of the things that we have learned is some of them are the MPOs. Particularly, this is true in a single state MPO. The governors or the mayor do provide additional responsibility to the MPO for a part of federal funding and lets the MPO implement and administer the entire program. So for example, we talked earlier about, Mayor Meyer talked about using CMAQ funding for the EV charging project in the city of Fairfax. In some MPOs, CMAQ funding is provided to the MPO, and the MPO has said that funding is provided to address congestion and air quality. So let the MPO, because these, especially air quality, is measured and designated at a MPO level, they have been asked to say, okay, you figure out what the best projects are for this funding and select the projects and administer those projects. So that is one way it's done. Of course, here with tri-states, each of the 3 states have their own internal processes for distributing not just CMAQ funding, but all kinds of funding. There are established processes. Some of them are in the legislative language itself. So that is one of the challenges in terms of having more of a hands-on role in project prioritization. What we have done, and this is something that I've been talking with my counterparts in other MPOs, we have been taking the TPB policy documents and reaching out to the local decision makers, whether it is at the state level or at the local agency level, and saying, you have your own priorities through which you select projects, through which you identify which projects are going to get funding. And that is great. Can you please ensure that the MPO's collective regional priorities are also integrated into that, so that we don't have that disconnect that Mr. Snyder was talking about? We want to make sure that, number one, they are aware that these are the TPB's, the regional priorities, and number two, ensure that they use it in their own processes. So that's kind of how we have been approaching it. Just last year, myself and Stacy, we met with all 24 member jurisdictions, their transportation directors and their land use planning directors. And we shared all of the TPB policy documents with them. And we have been regularly reaching out to them to say, how can we help? If you need any assistance in explaining or understanding these regional priorities, please let us know. We are happy to come. We are happy to take your input. So that's kind of how we've been working, rather than trying to see how we can be at the decision table, because that is many times informed by local requirements. We have been trying to see how best we can make sure that the TPB's policy priorities are on the decision makers' radar. So that's one way we've been trying to work on it.
Thanks, Kanti. All right. Let's see here. Were there any other questions from Virginia? Any questions from OMADA or federal agencies? All right, then thank you. So Lynn, at our February meeting, that's when you're going to bring back, from an action item perspective, the budget for us to then be able to take an action on the agenda then. That's correct?
So it's not going to be an action. It's going to be the whole document, but it's really going to be the meat about what specific activities we're going to be undertaking.
Got it. Okay, excellent. Well, we look forward to getting that then. All right, well, tell you what, since we are right at 2 o'clock, and Ken, our apologies, but we do not want to give short shrift to what you are going to be putting together for us. What we'll do is we'll put that on the agenda, and we'll put it early in the agenda for next month, so we make sure that we don't miss that. But thank you, Ken, for preparing everything. But we'll make sure we get that done in February. But again, I want to thank everybody for all the discussion and the follow-ups that we've got. Thank you to all of our presenters for this. Let me pull to my notes to make sure I say the right things here. Our next meeting is scheduled for February 17th. And so we'll certainly see the notices coming out from Conti and team about that. But otherwise, thank you, everybody. Wish you well for the rest of the week and look forward to seeing you all again very soon. And with that, This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Take care.